Good afternoon, everybody, and good evening or good morning where you are. It's been kind of great about this channel. Um, we've been we've had people across the world tuning in, and I totally appreciate your support and interest. And a couple weeks ago, we had Deborah on before, and we were talking about gaslighting and a couple other things, but really more light conversation. But then the audience really had a lot more questions and a lot more specific, and they really wanted us to dive in a little more. So I invited back Deborah back to our podcast. And so thank you. So if you're here, thank you for joining us. Just a quick um, housekeeping things. Next week we'll have Grace Grossman, and her stack will come out this Friday, so you can read up on her. Very interesting life choice and things like that, where she lived in Germany and she went to Costa Rica to be a teacher. So that's going to be a great conversation there. Also, I'm working on a book club. You're starting to see this in my private chat, where I'm asking authors who published a book. We're going to do one book per author for first, and then we're going to see how that goes. And I'm excited about that. We're working on maybe like 10 different authors right now, which is cool. And then I have another series coming out for the hospital stay that I had, and it's an update, and that's coming out this Wednesday. So in the meantime, if you have any questions for Deborah, or as our conversation goes, please put it in the chat, and we'll answer them as the best we can throughout the show. And like to bring in Deborah, so we'll start the journey here. Hey, Deborah,
Hi,
thank you for joining us.
my pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
So last week we had a conversation about not a couple weeks ago, actually. Sorry,
Yeah.
mine is not there yet. Regarding gaslighting, and we touched a little bit of the teenagers. We got into a little bit of the behaviorals and back and forth, and we basically sat around the 60,000 foot, not really diving into one specific area because I didn't think we needed to get there. But after the show, we definitely had a lot of people coming in asking us questions. So I guess we'll start with it mostly pertains around the teenagers. I guess a lot of parents are having, or teachers are having, issues with teenagers who have this issue of gaslighting. And we were kind of like talking before the show. I believe some of it's coming from our media, like social media, television, movies, are influencing our children one way or another to behave a certain way. But it's also the home life as well. Where do you believe? Now that's what my belief is. Where do you believe most of this stuff comes from?
Yeah. Well, I think I know where the confusion came from because, my two books, one is on gaslighting and one is a trauma recovery workbook for teenagers. And so I think there was an expectation that it was going to be gaslighting and teenagers put together. So that's where we're going to go today, right? But it's an interesting question. And I actually was on the Cat and Nat Unfiltered podcast to answer this very question a little while ago. So I know parents are curious about it. But one thing that's important to recognize in a discussion about gaslighting is that it is a system of emotional abuse about power and control. And so I want to be really cautious here in talking about teenagers gaslighting because teenagers tend to lack power and control in the dynamic with their parents. So it's very hard to say that they are actually gaslighting them. That said, the desire for power and control is really strong in teens as part of individuating, as a part of growing up and trying to find the power that maybe they didn't have. So it's going to happen more in family dynamics where children feel disempowered, where there's a more authoritarian or rigid family structure, and there's a need to push back stronger to gain a sense of self-efficacy and power. Where there's perhaps a lot of punishment, then there's going to be a desire to avoid punishment through deception, and to try to flip that. So I think we should probably start with a working definition of gaslighting, kind of walking. I'm going to So the
Okay.
cooling oven
Fair
is the
enough.
outside of that. Yeah, but so because it's used in the popular vernacular so much lately in the last couple of years since my book came out, it became like word of the year, and now it's used almost as an insult, like, "Oh, you're gaslighting me," when somebody disagrees with you, or you don't like what they're saying, and that really has watered it down. So to really understand it, gaslighting is an insidious form of emotional abuse using trying to use somebody's own memory against them to undermine your confidence in yourself and your own memories and senses, like what you hear, what you see, um, to cause that doubt in order to gain the upper hand. So, what that might look like, all of my caveats aside, what that might look like, perhaps in a parent teenager relationship from the teen side, is when perhaps a parent's been waiting up for their kid to come home by curfew, which was say 11, and they came in at 11:23, and the teenager's like, "No, your clock was wrong. Like I was there at like 10:53. You're just like flatly denying where there's clear evidence. Like what time it was. Your teenager saying the other thing and just telling you you're crazy. You must have fallen asleep. Your clock is wrong. You're remembering wrong. You're mixing up another night. Another night. So you can see how the sensory awareness is being denied. So it's a form of lying that goes against all evidence as well in order to shift the power dynamic. In this case, probably motivated by avoiding the punishment they know is coming.
So is that something? So is that a learned behavior? Where are they learning this? Is obviously if this is a child, one of the parents is actually, or both parents are exhibiting those behaviors, right? Passing that on to a child. Is that where it first starts?
Our parents do form our environment very much and therefore form who we are. So if you grow up with parents who don't have a really firm grip on truth being a high value, then you're much more likely to use deception to get your way. Um, so what I often see in people who are dishonest with their children is it comes from this well-intentioned or self-protective place, but they don't see the harm that they're doing. They really don't mean to. So people who say things like, "Oh, I tell them when the ice cream truck music is going that means they're out of ice cream because I just don't want to buy them the ice cream." The parent wants to avoid the difficulty of saying no and their kid melting down a bit, which really robs the child of a chance to learn self-regulation through disappointment on a small scale thing. So that's really not a great parenting choice, but it's an understandable one, right? That many people do. So these little lies, or instead of saying no to my kid, I'm going to make something up. But kids are not stupid. And a lot of these lies that parents tell kids are found out. And eventually your kid knows my parent lies to me. So if that's true, if your role model can do it, of course you can too. Even if the parent says, "Don't lie or I'll punish you," and they lie to you, you're going to take the example over the words. So, yes, when they get to be in a point where they're trying to get out of trouble or gain power in the dynamic with you, why wouldn't they lie? You've kind of shown them it's okay and it's what you do when you want to change your circumstances.
So I've had a couple of those examples in my raising my children,
Yeah.
and one in particular was a son who we were working together. Got him a job. I was working part time per se. I was actually helping a friend out. We cook on the side, and I was helping him prepare for this wedding. And it was an outdoor wedding. And how we were stationed, we were doing the pre-mat. We were busy. We're just working back and forth, doing all this stuff. And my son was hired just to be like a busboy, waiter, kind of making sure things are kind of moving through because it was a wedding. It was a big, huge wedding. It was like 250 people. So, my friend said, "Yeah, I'll hire him, whatever." And he brought him in, and we were still kind of like hot and cold. He still had a lot of resentment towards me. He does. But there's a lot of things going on. But what happened was there was an incident that happened, and I learned this after the fact, that he said something very, very, made some major allegations towards me, about me.
Mm.
And
Right.
pretty, they were pretty like, whoa, and he just kind of, and basically he just kind of just said it as like a throwaway, like, here you go,
Like, think
and
about the consequences of his words.
but the consequences of the conversation was what happened was the next time I went to go work for him, my friend, he basically said, I can't bring you in because my daughters don't want to have you around because they're afraid of certain things. And I'm like, what are we talking about? So when we actually finally got a therapist involved, his mother obviously denied that ever happened. He denied that would never happened. And then we were in front of the therapist, and at the therapist said he would not confess to any of this stuff. And I was sitting there talking to him, and I said, so I had my chance to talk after he blasted me for the last 20 minutes, 30 minutes about everything I did wrong as a parent, of course. And I sat there and I said to him, I said, there was 13 witnesses, or 13, 12 to 13 witnesses said that you said those things.
Mm.
And then the wedding party said you said those things. Like the whole wedding party you sat right behind them,
Mhm.
heard you making these false allegations about me after I got you to work with our friend, which was an easy thing it was a fun thing for me to do on the weekends because I was divorced and all that, but getting through the divorce. And I said, you kind of like not only sabotaged our relationship, but you sabotage a long-term relationship that I've had almost 20 years.
Mm.
And you also made a business decision. You made almost harm that business, liable business, because you decided to say something off the cup, unrelated to the event, harming his business. And on top of that,
Mm.
you harmed all the ladies who felt feared or scared or however they felt. You put them in a position of not good. So we sat there and he kept denying and denying and denying. This is him denying
Mm.
and
Mhm.
refused. He says, I don't remember saying that. I never said that. So this is what you're saying. And so I'm the more of the stern parent of the two. And I turned around and I say stern. I don't mean like I'm heavy handed, but I'm more of boundaries, respect, be honest, be truthful.
Yeah.
Let's be accountable. That's sort of like my parenting
That's important.
style.
Mm.
And then he turned around and he said, well, what are you going to do about it? I said, well, it's very simple. What I'm going to do. I love you, always will love you, no matter what.
So
But
good to
this is
reinforce that.
but this is where the relationship needs to stop. You need to apologize not to me, but to his daughters, to him personally, and say sorry. That was not meant. That was just meant out of jest, or however you want to phrase it. And you need to apologize to me. Until
Mm.
we can move past that, I don't know how we can have a relationship.
Mm. Mm.
So I've experienced it firsthand, and a lot of it, I think, in my situation, a lot of it comes from his mother, and how loose she is, and more of let's be friends rather
Mm.
than being a parent. I'm sure she has some parenting, but a lot of it's loosey goosey type of, and it was proven in court that's what it was. But
Mhm.
all my children have that tendency of gaslighting to the point where they will say something and all of a sudden revert back. Well, I never said that. That's not true.
Mm.
Is that a common theme in divorce where the children do that kind of stuff, or is this something out of the blue? Because from what I'm hearing and what I'm hearing or reading and writing about stuff like that, a lot of people are experiencing that too. So I shared that story
Mhm.
just to kind of give you a baseline where I'm
Mhm.
coming from. So we're not so
Yeah, I mean, all behavior is either learned or developed as a response to some kind of a need. So, from what you've shared in our previous conversations too about your dynamic with your ex-wife, it's very plausible or probable that this is a copied or learned behavior. When I think about some of the very public sphere gaslighters who are very just very consistent with this behavior, what we know about their childhoods is not good, not nurturing, not supportive, but a lot of elevation of bullying or internal conflict. So these behaviors don't typically just arise from smooth sailing. There's, again, every behavior has motivation. It's not random. I don't believe that children are born evil. Um,
Oh, yeah.
just like being raised in that belief system. I think behavior is adaptive. So when we look at a behavior in our child that we don't um, we have to think, okay, let's take a step back. Where is this coming from? One part of that question might be, what have I maybe contributed to this? Or how have I? And another question, which may or not be about you, is what need are they trying to serve? And it doesn't mean that their behavior is justified. It's an appropriate way to meet a need. Um, that need might be for self-esteem, for a sense of security, um, for, for peace, like avoiding conflict. Um, or where, and I guess the third one would be, where have they seen this before? What are they copying? How did they learn this as an appropriate or
Right.
plausible adaptive behavior? And because when you get to the heart of the why, then that gives you a starting point to which path do you take toward how do I address this. So if somebody is lying, if your child is lying for a certain need, is that a need that you can meet more? Like I've known of people who do just kind of crazy lying for attention, right? If it's lying for attention, are you maybe what they really need is more attention, but not through that line. Like let's not put oxygen to the crazy made up stories, but maybe in quieter, simpler times. Just spend a little more time. Maybe that's what they need, just to know that they matter. So like distancing from the crazy lying, focusing in elsewhere. If the lying is to get out of this bubble, take a step and evaluate whether your system of discipline is working effectively. Is it shaping the behaviors you want, or is it just creating a power struggle that isn't actually contributing to their character growth? And then maybe you take a look at that. And maybe look at a parenting coach if you're feeling like, I don't know what else to do. Help me find solutions because my child is spiraling in the bad direction. And all I can think to do is pile on punishments that they then lie to get out of. And
Right.
so maybe that's not the right answer. Um, yeah, I guess those are two of the big reasons people lie: to get out of trouble and to get attention.
Yeah, I can see that. That was definitely in my case, the attention grab,
Mm,
very spontaneous, very, um, what do you call it? Eruptive, like really instant, really
mhm,
like dynamite almost, like in a behavior. Like he'll go from 0 to 100. Uh,
mhm,
Good news is we're talking now. We are talking. I haven't even addressed that portion of stuff, but I wanted to. There was a couple things that were happening. He reached out when I was sick. He was making sure that I was
mhm.
okay. So
Okay.
that was a good thing. And there's a couple other things that we did. We do text now.
Mhm,
He does ask. He asks me question, and I've not had a chance to really. And I'm not my strategy. I guess it's not a strategy, but my thought process is this. Let's just develop the relationship and see where it goes before I even lay any of the foundations down or lay down any of my concerns. Let him
mhm,
have his moment, let him talk, and let him see where he's going. But I do see the reaction that he does, and I also see it with other children too, other situations. Because I guess I'm so sensitive that now that I see
mhm,
it quicker.
mhm,
Um, I think when I was much younger with them, I just took it as a behavioral issue that just needed to correct.
mhm,
But they were really screaming more of, you know, direction. And I don't know how that, I mean, but I couldn't give them direction in a very toxic relationship with my ex wife. It was
mhm,
very hard because they would come home, they would be charged with whatever the weekend was. And then I was trying to decompose them and kind of get them going and get them straight and and that would be their cycle. And that in itself was also harmful. Um,
Yeah, it's very challenging to parent when you don't have a unified approach and you lack, especially when you see your approach oppositely from your parenting partner, and
yeah,
then you have control of the environment your child is in. And so there's a special kind of grief in that when you see your kids being negatively impacted and not have the ability to steer the ship in a different direction because you don't have enough in the
yeah.
environment.
And I keep thinking back to my time. Would I have done anything different? And probably not because
Mhm.
I would not know any better. Like
Yeah.
now I know better, but I don't even know how. And then I look at other parents who are going through divorce who have similar things. And one of the things I mean, someone always tells me when I was like, focus on the children, focus on the children, focus. Well, you can focus on the children so much, but you also have this other entity here that continues to bark at you and
Mm.
make allegations. So I can see these children coming in a classroom so confused and so angry and so mad. Is it really all gaslighting, or is it just they just don't know how to um, find the outlet? They don't know where to release their tension. Like, I mean, there's gym, there's this and that, but how do you? I mean, I guess most children will figure out, I'll work on art, I'll do writing, or that's their creative path, or they'll do exercise, or I'll join a sport. But
And as adults, it's easy to think of that. Like, what are some positive outlets and what are some coping skills that I can use when I'm stressed? But as a child, it's a lot harder. And when your parents are both in their own conflict driven worlds, they may not be as, or may not, the child may not perceive them as being as emotionally available to be like, help me work through my struggle, when the struggle has a lot to do with the fact that your whole family is fracturing. And
mhm.
so for a child, a divorce is a very stressful life event, even when it needs to happen, because their whole sense of stability is changing. Even if stability was involving a lot of anger and discomfort, that big change is a very difficult time. And when we're going through difficult times, that's when our anxieties rise, especially attachment anxiety, right? Attachment about security, about remaining in contact. And when people's attachment security is activated, that's when people get manipulated. And so gaslighting is a form of manipulation. Lying is about manipulation, right? So when you don't feel secure, you're less likely to be direct and saying, hey, I need this. I need more time with you. Or I feel angry when you da da da. Instead, we get circuitous and we manipulate, we avoid, we get passive aggressive. And gaslighting and lying can be part of that.
I mean, we all kind of manipulate, don't we? I mean, that's one. Like as a child, we manipulated our mother or father to convince them to buy something, or we were hiding. I mean, like, what's the difference between us growing up to today's children that are growing up? What's the like? How can we compare that?
It's interesting. There's always comparisons between generations, but a lot of times there's more in common than we like to admit. You know, they're always doing the kids these days thing, but every generation has been doing that. And there's new stressors for every generation, and our kids right now, I feel like are facing so much with. We're going through a revolution right now, not like that in the streets revolution, but like the industrial revolution. Now we're going through the AI revolution. That's
Yeah.
completely changing economy for the kids launching into society. The kids in school now, K through 12, they all grew up with social media being a thing already, with everybody having smartphones. They have a whole different experience that way with parents distracted, being on their phones in their infancy and toddler years when we're so in need of eye to eye attunement in their parent. Huh? Yeah, uh-huh. When they're at the park and watching. All this is a very different experience that's causing some problems for them. So there are differences, and yet there's something so similar in what we
Well,
need is always the same, a secure, loving relationship with a parent or parents that
yeah.
makes us feel like we matter.
So do you think the influencers today, obviously their goal is to make money on social media
Mm,
because that's
yeah.
their job.
Mm.
Do you think most social media people, personalities, when they see a child, they don't really care. They look at it as a dollar value, and then like there's more access to actresses, people, rappers, and all that, and it's just inundated with so much garbage out there. I believe
Mm.
um, that it's harmful to the children. And we can talk about a little bit of politics because politics is one of them. Because I've never seen a generation of young people so politically charged, but they're also misinformed and they're also kind of like going down these hateful path. And I just is it I'm trying to understand this in a sense. Like I know social media is bad for children because it's not really meant for them. I don't think that's content for them.
Mm.
And then they get all this news information and they get really confused. And rather than living their life, like it's like teaching, we're making them grow up faster than they should. And then they got pornography involved. You got all these things. I mean, how do we fix that? Is there a way to fix that, or is it just something that we just have to deal with as a parent?
Wow, that's how to fix that. That's such a loaded question. Yeah, I
I
think
know you
there's
can't fix it. I don't mean it by that way, but I'm
um,
just thinking,
what can
how
we
do
do?
how do we
There's
get
no
out of
data.
this? Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it, it's true that having smartphones is so damaging because, like, yeah, we always had TV, we always had video games, but we used to have more enforceable limits, like turn it off now, right? Go
yeah,
play outside.
yeah.
You didn't take it to school with you. You weren't checking between classes or even in classes, depending on what state you live in. If they have regulations about phone use in school, and here in California they do now, thank goodness. But and in a lot of countries in Europe, which is like a bell-to-bell phone ban, and it gives them a pause, but then they go home from school and it's phone, 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 phone. And so, like, yeah, that's social media, that's porn, that's just the constant barrage of input, right? That can be very distressing. And like you said, influencers are they're motivate. I mean, it's a you're not an influencer for fun. You're an influencer as a income, right? And
Yeah,
so what drives clicks and subscribes is outrage, something a hot take. So adding all the nuance of a situation, like this politician said this, but let's also explore like, are there checks and balances on that? Is that really going to happen? Should we do we need to be alarmed yet, or should we wait and see? Like that's not going to drive clicks, right?
right, right.
But it's a lot better for your nervous system if you can stop and say, okay, like a recent example is there was word of like Trump would not rule out the draft. Okay, so then we get a whole bunch of, oh my gosh, the draft is going to happen. Well, that's not necessarily the same, like, that was probably a stupid thing to say, but like there's so many checks and balances before that would happen that now is not the time to freak out. But a social media influencer is going to put it out there in a way that gets you activated and gets you upset because that's going to make you share it with the next person. It's going to make you stay tuned. They're going to get more likes and activation and comments, etc. So that it can become really toxic. And this isn't just teenagers and young people. Like this
Oh,
is
it's adults too. Yeah,
everybody our age too.
yeah.
Yeah. So we have to be so cognizant of how we take in media, how we take in information, how much time we allow that for, and who we're letting influence our mind and our mental space, and putting limits on that where we can step aside and we can pause and think critically. Because if you're just consuming reel after reel after reel, there's not even a time to think and analyze and use your own intellect to say, okay, how likely is that? Could there be anything misleading in what was shared? Um, and that can be really calming, and just having that break. And what
So
the problem with kids is if we haven't learned to do it, we're not teaching it to them. And if they grow up with it, how are they going to learn how to think critically, how to put the brakes on something that's designed to be addictive?
right. So what you're saying is, as and I'm just trying to regurgitate this in my layman's terms. So you're basically saying, as a parent or a teacher, there you can't control the action, you control your actions more or less. So
Yeah,
the
what
if
you
you
model.
react if you react to it, then you are inflaming it. You are adding gas to it,
Mm,
and you're allowing that behavior to continue. So using my analogy where I said this line, this boundary sits, was that a I mean, I'm the therapist said that was a good move because it just showed there's boundaries. But I mean, like, I keep thinking back that day, was it a good move or wasn't a bad move? And I think it was sort of a good move in some ways because it shows there's some respect. So as a teacher and a parent who are dealing with teenagers in that situation, so setting up boundaries is that, but setting it with clear intentions, is that something that needs to be established, or is that something that are those boundaries flexible as time moves it forward?
Well, you yourself, the person who sets the boundaries, is always the one who's in charge of whether or not you want to flex or change or even annul a boundary that you've set. But yes, every relationship requires boundaries. Boundaries aren't just walls to push people out or things you set up when you're uncomfortable in a relationship. A boundary is what keeps a relationship healthy. So, for example, like to use some really universal ideas, I lock my door at night. That's a boundary saying nobody's going to walk in. Actually, I keep it
Yeah.
locked. Like nobody's going to walk into my house. This is my door. Um, that's not hostile. I expect that if somebody wants to make a sexual advance, they're going to ask. That's a boundary, right? So
Yeah.
boundaries are for everybody. Okay. So then applying those to direct relationships, it is self-respect and certain standards. Like I expect people to be honest with me and to take accountability when there's been a breach in a relationship.
Mm.
Um, you might have a boundary about like what, when and in what form you want to be contacted, and that's a boundaries to protect your well-being, your physical well-being, and your emotional well-being.
Right.
So yes, absolutely appropriate to have boundaries with your children, and for your children to have boundaries with you.
Oh yeah, the best thing is, well, by the way, my doors can't be locked because Remy likes to come sleep with us, so we don't have a choice.
That the door to your apartment or house, though, is gonna be locked at night, I would imagine, right?
Yes,
Like, to
there
the
is.
outside world. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm talking about.
Uh, but yeah, the children have boundaries too. They'll turn around and say, "I'm going to cancel you," or something in those type of terms, where they'll say, "I'm done talking to you," and they'll push you away. And it's just like, they don't want to like so from my experience, I can only speak, they will close the door because they're not comfortable talking about it, even
So,
though.
there's a difference between a boundary and estrangement, right?
Okay.
Um, so I think of boundaries. I wrote about this in a post about 3 or so weeks ago, if anybody wants to look it up and go deeper into it. But, like, I think of boundaries as those dotted lines in the road, like, this is my side, this is your side. Now we can both share the space without harming each other, without crashing into each other, um, and it defines the relationship between my vehicle and your vehicle and this bicyclist and this pedestrian. Um, when, there's a road barrier, road closed, I don't think of that so much as a boundaries, like, there's just no relationship, there's nothing
Right.
there. So estrangement is a whole different level. Like, I feel like it's boundaries or estrangement or lack of boundaries, which is really unhealthy, but that's not what we're talking about. Because like I said, a boundary is how you can have a relationship in a way that's healthy for both of you. So if you cut it off, it's really not healthy for both of you. It's withdrawal, and that's sometimes necessary, but very often, and this is happening more and more, it it's a lack of maturity or emotional awareness of how to exist in difficult places, how to work through conflict, how to sit with your own discomfort about your own shame. If like, for example, perhaps your son feels shame about knowing he lied to you, and instead of being able to sit with that and truly apologize, he's going to withdraw to protect his ego, which again comes back to that thing about needs, right? Like we need to feel okay about ourselves, kind of. That's not the path to get there, though. It's more of a like when you curl up around an injured part rather than healing it. So, yeah, I don't see estrangement the same. Although sometimes people take a pause, like I need some time, less frequency of contact. Um, but like what you're saying earlier, I think the boundary I heard in what you said um, is there's a boundary about honesty. Like we're going to have a relationship that's based on truth. And so when I presented you with this evidence of um, where you were bad mouthing me and then making things up that was clearly, and you said you didn't, like we have to reconcile that. So that's where I'm hearing about boundaries, that our relationship will be based on truth and we're going to work through conflicts. And then he chose not to meet you in that, unfortunately. And I hope he does.
Yeah, he's going through his own issues,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
he needs to kind of go through his own path. He's an
Mhm.
adult now.
Yeah.
Right now, I think the maturity level right now is not there. I think it's going to take some time for him to get through it, and I think that's what children needs to do, is like they need to go live their life a little bit to really understand what a parent had to go through to get there. And
Mm.
I think a lot of the kids today tend to push um, this gaslighting, whatever you want to call it, bulliness, all the sorts of things, the behaviors that are happening today. I think they just push it to the point where, you know, either looking for a reaction. For example, I saw today there was a couple guys hanging out in front of or go walking through the courthouse or the court, whatever, office buildings, or government official buildings with cameras and just videotaping. And everybody's like, "What are you doing here? Why are you videotaping?" Oh, it's okay. You don't need to worry about that. And he keeps walking, and all of a sudden the cops come in. I don't know if you've seen these videos where all of a sudden they say, "It's my First Amendment right." Blah blah blah. Well, they're just trying to get reactions. They're trying to
Mhm.
provoke. They're trying
Privacy.
to engage. They're trying to get some reaction for content, and
Yeah.
they're using the First Amendment to do that. But they're doing that in a way that is not just. It's like it's it's teaching people it's okay to push people's boundaries because you don't respect them. I mean,
Mhm.
yes, you have the constitutional right to film anywhere you want in a on a public space. That's your constitutional right
Mhm.
because you have the First Amendment. But there's a morality part of it where I think we've are losing that battle of respecting each other's spaces or respecting each other's boundaries, and it gets toxic and it gets conflated and it gets really messy, and all of a sudden this is where the kids are seeing this is it's acceptable because, oh, I can do it because the law says so. Well, I don't think we're teaching the values of morals and ethics and things like that. Is it is it uh, is it constitutionally right? Yes, you can. Is it morally right? I don't think so. And is it ethical to do that when someone who is saying, I don't want to be filmed, but you still film them
Mhm.
regardless? So, and then there was a debate online where a producer, a director came on and said, well, if you're filming for monetary reasons, then you need to have them waiver off signs because you are making money. And then the
Mhm.
other debate was, well, it's constitutional right. So I think gaslighting has taken off in a way that it's we're seeing it in different areas, not just in our schools, but also in just day-to-day life. And
Mhm.
it just I think where our kids are being educated on is through the social media and through video games and things like that, where they're allowed to be reckless, and death is not like
Mhm.
they can they kill shots
Mhm.
and things like that. I think it's getting worse. It's not getting better.
You asked earlier what we can do about that, and I don't think I really spent enough time on that question, or maybe I answered something different. But I think it's fair, and we're parents of older children at this point, but it is very important for parents to monitor their children's smartphone use and social medias, especially when they're younger. So, think carefully about how early you're going to give your child a smartphone, and don't just do it because everybody else is doing it. Is your child really ready? Are there alternatives if your child needs a phone for safety besides a full unrestricted smartphone? If and when you do give them a smartphone, which they'll have at some point, um, do they have unrestricted access to it? Do they use it in their room with the door closed, or the living room, or at the table where you can walk behind them at any random time? Does it get plugged in their bedroom where they're staying up all night on it and doing who knows what? Or is it plugged in your bedroom to charge at night so you know when they're done and have a chance to look over it? If you bought the phone, um, with openness to your child, you can set regulations and say, you're allowed to use this at these times, and I'm going to be going through it at random because it's my phone. I bought it. I'm just lending it to you. Um, yes, children need privacy, but they also need to earn it. Like they need to show that they have the developmental maturity for it. Like we don't give our 2-year-olds privacy, right? Like we're changing their diapers, we're supervising them at all times. We grow into privacy. And so to say my 12-year-old needs absolute privacy, I wouldn't read her diary, so why would I look at her phone? A diary and a phone are not the same thing. A diary is not nearly as dangerous. So it's kind of like handing your kids the keys to the car before they're old enough to drive and be like, fine, it's a dangerous world out there. There are sexual predators grooming children, there are classmates sexually preying on your kids. And if you don't have open conversations with kids about how to handle these very real and very distressing stressors, how are they supposed to know what to do? When that guy they have a crush on at 12 years old, who's maybe also 12 years old, is like, hey, like, send me a picture of this part of your body. And they're like, well, I don't know what I should do. I don't want him to not like me. Like, these are complicated issues for little kids. So, talk to your kids, have regulations, monitor them, and be internally strong enough as a parent to let your kid be mad at you. I think that's one of the things that is really core to being a good parent, is being comfortable with your kid being upset with you. They'll also know you're a safe parent when you're consistent with your boundaries with them. And I'm not
So
being mean to them, so they're mad at you because you're being mean to them. But like when you're just calm, cool, and collected, you're like, no, I'm sorry. I know. Yep, yes, Sarah gets to have her phone unrestricted, and that's not what we do in our house. And your kid's mad about that, and you're loving and firm. Like that's a parenting win.
So if you join the podcast today, if you want to ask a question, please feel free, put it in the chat, um, and then we can address it. In the meantime, we are talking about gaslighting and what does that look like, and what are the tools that we can use, and using some of my experience, I guess, is the best way to kind of. I'll be the test dummy here.
Very
So,
brave of you.
well, I mean, Um, but if you do have any questions, please shoot them out, or send them out, and we can definitely respond to that. I've just been just sitting here thinking about this whole our society, how things are coming together, and I keep thinking about the well-being of our community. That's why I guess Substack has been a little gem of mine, because it's
Mhm.
not Facebook where you get shamed by your relatives and friends and saying, accusing you of, what do you mean you're a writer all of a sudden? What what do you mean you're writing books? And then you go to Twitter, or X now, and it's full of political rhetoric, which is gaslighting 101, and then you have to go through it and kind of figure out what makes sense. TikTok used to be Musically, which I really loved when I was with my kids, because we did a lot of musical little things. We
Mhm.
did mimic things. We did songs. My daughter was doing a bunch of stuff, and it was really cute. And it was called Kids Growing Up. I think it was called that. And I had like several, like 10,000 followers. It was really humming along. And then became TikTok, and then there was a major switch. It just turned into
Mhm.
more of like this toxic. Actually on there, which is really one of the things that I want to say is now I don't know if it's an act. I think it's an act where someone has put their profile on Tinder and went on a date, and the husband found it or the wife found it, and now you can see that playing out on
Mhm.
TikTok, and you're thinking to myself, I mean, how do you like that's a form of abuse to yourselves, and you're either good or bad. It doesn't good, but that's what
Mhm.
our society looks like, and then you have everything else added onto that. As a parent or as a teacher, what I mean, obviously, you got to control yourself and control who you are, and there's only certain things you can do. I mean, you come in the day focused on your well-being and trying to be focused. How is a person, excuse me, how is a person, you know, I mean, because we're getting really inundated about all this. How do we learn to kind of like take a break, deep breathe? Because it's
Mhm.
challenging. I have a hard time now
Mhm.
disengaging.
I think that's a
What does
great
that,
place to start your question. Like how can we? Because when we start with ourselves, then we're modeling for our kids. If
right?
we are completely glued to our phones whenever they're around, why would they do differently? You know? So if they see us putting the phone down in another room when we have dinner, or, putting the phone away and working out, or outside and gardening, or whatever it is your thing is, um, they're going to see it's okay to not have it in your pocket, your hand, to respond to every beep or buzz immediately. Um, I think, it's really important to model. So the question is like, how do we get there? Recognizing our sense of addiction to it, that dopamine surge we get from the likes and the scrolls and but also recognize like it's good to check in with yourself when you're on social media. Like ask yourself, am I feeling happier than I was when I started?
Mm.
And if the answer is yes, then maybe you're in a sweet spot. But pretty soon, I find it's like there's a little peak where like it's fun, and then you start feeling more and more and more and more miserable, kind of like you've eaten too much cake and you keep eating it. Like,
Yeah.
there's a sweet spot. Then it's time. So ask yourself that question and respond to the feedback you're getting, because we have it's intermittent reinforcement, which is a behavioral therapy principle. The idea that the most effective way to reinforce the behavior is to sometimes reward it, not to always reward it. So, because then you think like, well, maybe this time I'm going to get the reward, which is like that little happy dopamine hit, or you're going to find the one thing that makes you laugh or makes you go, So that's what social media does. And we keep thinking, well, if I just scroll a little bit further, I'm going to see something I like. But why not just let it go? Like, I got the value of it I was going to get today. I've connected, and use it with intention. Like, ask yourself even before you habitually open whichever your app of your drug of choice is. Um,
All of
what do
them.
I want to? Yeah, well, okay.
All of them.
um, what do I want to get from this? Like, there's so many different reasons to use social media. It could be part of your, like, what you're doing for money, like an influencer, or marketing your book or your work, your services. You could be doing it for old school reasons of actually socially connecting with people. Like, I know, you and I are both Canadians, and I know my family's over there, and so up in Canada, and to me, it's a way to keep in touch with my far-flung family as well. And I have to be really intentional, though, in using it that way, because there was a time when you would open it and you'd see what your friends are up to. Now I have to look those people up and see, like, what did my dad post? What did my cousin post? And then shut it. Because if I scroll, I'm getting advertisements, and I'm getting fake news too now, which is a really fun thing. Like, pages I don't even subscribe to. It's like suggested for you. And yesterday it told me Michelle Obama was running for president. And so I Googled that. I'm like, that doesn't sound consistent with anything she did. And it had like thousands of likes already and all these comments. And um, like, and it was just a pushed page that I wasn't following, that, fact checked is not true. So it's like, it's just feeding me lies and things to buy. Like, it's not making me happy. And of course, the algorithms push forward the things that are outrageous, that make
Yeah,
you
Facebook
sad.
is where I connect with people, like
Yeah,
family people, and
yeah.
I do have a private page. I do have a public page for my writing and art,
I'm the
and
same, public and private.
yeah, so that's where I push all my writing and stuff like that. And then
Mm.
on my personal page, it's really more, looking for updates from friends or just staying connected and family and friends. That's all I'm doing.
And that shows our
'Cause-
age, because that's like
yeah,
Gen X does Facebook, millennials
yeah,
does Instagram, Gen Z does TikTok, right? Or sometimes
it's
we do all of them.
yeah, Instagram. It's another I just push content up there
Yeah.
from writing and pictures and things like that. And then X is where I get my news, or I want to play around a little bit.
Mm.
you know, give some senators a hard time. and then and then Substack's really my place of peace. That makes
Hmm.
sense. It's because
Yeah.
I really respect people coming on here. I don't know.
Hmm.
It takes a lot of balls to come on Substack and write for yourself, and have other people come on there and judge you,
Hmm.
strangers.
Hmm.
And sometimes you get a hit, sometimes you don't, sometimes you get kind of like whatever, but the community comes back with a different response. It's like, that's well done, thank you, wow, keep it up, work on it. Hey, or they're sharing values, they're sharing secrets, or sharing trades, tools and things like that. They're giving more to the community than I've ever seen in any other communities. It's
Hmm.
more of like coming together. Let's work together. And I guess that's how Substack was sort of formed, was to like remove the noise, which is the gaslighting, the toxicity, and just focus on co co-authoring, collaborating, however you want to call it, and try to work together, because we praise that more than just posting all day. And
Hmm.
I think that's where, and don't get me wrong, there's some gaslighting on Substack if you really look for it, but I intentionally don't look for it. I don't want to listen to that. I don't want to talk to that.
Hmm.
I got other places where I can do that if I want to go and take a break and just be whatever I want to be that day. Um,
Hmm.
but and then on Substack, sometimes it does get a little bit exhausting, and I do have to take a break or take a debrief. That's so it can be. I think social media can be overwhelming for a lot of people, and it is overwhelming for me sometimes. And it's just, I, I guess consuming it could alter your. It could be good or bad, to be honest. Some good
Yeah.
and some bad.
Yeah. So know your purpose when you use it, and make your actions align with that so that it serves you rather than simply harming you. And I agree. I really like the ability for deep and meaningful engagement on Substack. I really try to provide something of value, often with a level of nuance that would never fit into a TikTok video. Um, or something like a short form Instagram post. So there's a depth here that I think intellectual, like intelligent, curious readers are drawn to, and I think that creates it elevates the the dialogue.
Right. Yeah. Um, this actually been really good conversation. We went a little bit everywhere. I do appreciate you going through the weaves with me and kind of going bouncing back and forth. Um, but I kind of want to, before we depart, what are something that you can give back to the community or to people and say, hey, what tools can you can share that would help people overcome some of these problems that we're facing today, or how do you recognize them?
These problems, meaning like the social media or parenting issues,
Gaslighting,
you brought up,
particularly
yeah.
gaslighting or teenagers,
Yeah.
if you're facing it. I know we touched a little bit on that, but I just want to just make
Mm.
sure we drive that home a little bit.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, if you want to deep dive into gaslighting, definitely take a look at my book, which is, pull up a copy, my gaslighting book, Step by Step Recovery Guide. It has a lot of, it's very broken down, recognizing gaslighting. There may be a free checklist on my website. If not, email me and I'll send it to you, for seeing those signs, but also what can you do? And so to like, just to give that out now though, like what can you do if you feel like there's somebody who's gaslighting you in your relationship, whether that's your partner or your kid or your boss or whatever? Um, to go back to your example, you went and you gathered evidence. You talked to other people. You clarified your own perception. Like, did this really happen? So that's a good place to start because the gaslighter is fundamentally trying to make you doubt yourself. So if you can clarify to yourself, like, am I misperceiving? Because sometimes let's be humble. Sometimes we misremember things. Sometimes we don't perceive things accurately. And so
Mhm.
we want to be so knee jerk to call everything gaslighting that might not be. But clarify.
Right.
And if you're in a pattern, if somebody is a pattern of doing this, then you might need to create a pattern of gathering that evidence or recording it. So like journaling every day or taking notes in meetings with that boss who keeps changing the story. Um, you know, taking screenshots of your phone of certain things. If somebody has a disappearing text thing and later's like, I never texted that. I'm not saying like to put on social media. Don't put screenshots of people's stuff on social media. Do it for yourself. If you're starting to be like, wait, did they say that or not? Okay. So you're creating a record to help you validate your own self,
Yeah.
not to win fights. Because here's the thing: if you're in a relationship with somebody who's a chronic gaslighter, you're not going to win the fight. They don't want to come to reconcile. They're not going to be like, yeah, caught me. Never mind. I'll never do that again. So this is to ground yourself and
Right.
uh, and then to create the boundaries within that relationship. Because there's no closeness with somebody who does that all the time unless they change. There's a relationship perhaps, but it may not be very intimate. You may need to put certain boundaries in place, and that's a whole other topic. We don't have time
Right.
to
Right.
really get into what that might look like. Or you may need to get to a point where that relationship ends if it's very, very toxic and abusive.
Mm.
So lots to look at there. Not necessarily with your young child, but gaslighting in general. If your child is a lying problem, again, I want to say this with so much gentleness because I think we all love our children. We want to do the best by them, but also we're all so messy and imperfect. Like we all are, and our mess does wear off, rub off on our children, right? But while I say that, like, have compassion on yourself, um, for the ways that you know you've been imperfect, and I include myself in this. But also look at those objectively as you can and say, where did I train a certain behavior I might like, and how can I shift that dynamic? And ask yourself, what need underlies this behavior that's so odious to me, but what's underneath it? And remind yourself, who is this child that I love? So that you have that heart to heart connection while trying to address the behavior. Don't let problematic behaviors just go. Like, not much I can do. I don't want to upset them. Like, it is still your responsibility, right, to shape them, even when that causes friction. So I don't know. I hope that's a little bit helpful when you see
No,
gaslighting.
that actually, yeah, no, actually, the one thing that you mentioned there was the assumption part of things. Sometimes we do assume too quickly, and we don't have all the facts. Um, so, is that sort of a form of gaslighting if you're assuming before things are happening? Because we are so quick to create allegations because that's how we're being trained. I mean, is that a form of gaslighting yourself? Like, if you are jumping to these allegations quickly and you're just making all these assumptions without really a clear, even if you have facts, I don't think going public with it really helps unless it's
Mm.
something really, really bad.
Yeah, it may be a self-protective, expression in that we wanna figure out what's dangerous, and so we jump to accusations, but it's so important to label behaviors without assigning motivation necessarily, because we can't always know somebody's motivation, but we can say, "This is what happened from my perspective." So, that's one of the biggest ways that you're gonna break down a relationship is, like, you did this because, let's, for example, I'm meeting a friend and she shows up 15 minutes late, and I tell myself the story that she's doing it to show that she's in control and more important than me. Well, that's going to break down my relationship really fast instead of just having
Right.
a compassionate curiosity about, like, wonder how her morning was going, right? So that's a simple example, but can be applied on any scale. It is often the sense of self protection. I need to understand the world, but maybe we can stay a little bit curious and a little bit uncertain and get comfortable with uncertainty rather than always trying to label everybody and put everybody in a box.
We do have a question
Okay.
from Bridge. What am I thinking by myself? Doesn't gaslight need kind of co-workers to function? One person gaslights a second one must not be there. Sorry, I can't. I have a hard time seeing. There's some belief witness out from outside to support one of the both positions. So, what am I thinking by myself? What am I thinking by myself? Doesn't gaslight need kind of coworker to function? When one person gaslights one, a second one must be their belief a witness from outside to support one of both positions.
I don't think I understood the question.
I'm gonna
Can you
throw this in
present
the
it with
chat
that?
box and see if you can see it, and maybe you can. I think what they're,
If I tap this little chat button,
yeah.
message from. Okay, what am I thinking by myself? What I'm thinking by myself, doesn't gaslighting need kind of coworkers to function? Well, okay, when one person gaslights the second one, mustn't there be some belief or witness from the outside to support one of the decisions? Okay, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, in my book, I call this the flying monkey. So gaslighters tend to surround themselves with people who will support them and not contradict them, and push out anybody who would fact check them or
Mm.
put their hold their feet to the ground. So absolutely, that's a really common thing. Um, Whether that's like the friends or, like you said, coworkers, bosses hire people who are like yes men very often, or yes women, who are just
Oh,
not
okay.
going to contradict
Yeah.
them and going to go along with it. Absolutely, that's a really good point, and that's a
That
very,
actually
very
happens a
yeah.
lot of times where you come into a business and all of a sudden it's like I guess the best analogy is in high school where you have the clique,
Yeah, the mean
the
girls surrounding
popular
everybody
kids,
there.
the popular kids, they're all like football, whatever they are, football star, soccer, whatever, basketball, they're all kind of like that. And they
Mhm.
kind of dictate how everything else goes.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, the
yeah.
mean girls gonna be surrounded by other
Oh
little
yeah,
mean
Mean
girls
Girl
who are
syndrome.
going
Yeah.
to be like, "You don't see that, that's kinda rude." Like, that girl's social life's over, so they're all just, "Oh, you're amazing." We see this
So
for sure in politics, where you literally have the top dog is literally able to surround themselves by assigning positions to people, to staffers or whatever that will confirm them. So that's a universal example. So there's another question.
there's another question. I thought that since that worked better than me reading it out.
Good.
Uh, so when you're ready, so when you already have proof your child is lying, is beneficial to ask them things like, "Why did you think these other people are saying this in something you did or said?" And then ask, "What do you think would be consequences of not being truthful with me for lying?" The child must face fact or truth. Well, that kind of goes back to your original thing about boundaries, and sometimes children don't really confess to it, right? Because they're going to deny it until you give up. Is that basically what happens in that situation?
Yeah, especially if they're afraid, like they're afraid of the punishment, then there's just they're gonna deny it to the end of the line. And also, like that's a really typical thing of gaslighters is they can tell the most crazy lies and just keep doubling down on it, despite evidence, because it isn't about evidence, right? So in general, I'm gonna say this in general way, and then like kind of circle back to the parenting question. In general, it's best not to argue with a gaslighter. Like to try to confront them with proof because they're not going to back down. You need to be, you have to kind of get comfortable with knowing the truth for yourself and just recognizing, okay, this is crazy lying. I'm going to remain calm and grounded and say, you know what, I have different evidence and I see it a different way, rather than trying to prove you of prove them, the gaslighter, that they're
Right.
wrong. They're wrong, and they just need to know that you see through their lies, and therefore they've lost power. That's it. So the same can apply to your child. Like I mean, I think that would be a great way to say, like, well, that's interesting that the other kids are saying something different. What do you think that's about? Yeah, absolutely. That you can totally go with that. Um, if that's applicable to scenario, and if that isn't there, if there aren't any witnesses, but you know, um, based on, you've got the cookies all over the mouth, right? I didn't eat the cookies, that kind of thing. Like, well, I I know that that's not true, and I don't want to argue with you about it. So we're just not going to have any more. I don't think we're going to be able to have cookies for a while because I just don't really feel like baking more right now if we're going to end up in conflicts about it. So that's a
Mm.
bummer, huh? Well, maybe we'll try again sometime. So you can, like you asked about consequences, the questioner asked about that. And I think natural connected consequences are usually the most effective because when you have disconnected consequences, it feels like a war between you and the child. It feels to the child like you're just being a bully, right? You're just being mean to them. When it's connected, it has more of a teaching power. So, like in my example of like, they took the cookie without asking or whatever, and when they weren't supposed to, right before dinner, and it's like, we just won't have cookies in the house because they seem like really tempting, and I don't want to have you have to deal with that stress. So,
Right.
I mean, there's a million examples. Probably there's so many different ways that kids will come up with ways to get out of whatever, but hopefully you can extrapolate from that idea. So,
Mm.
like, saying, "Oh, past curfew." Well, we're going to change the curfew or something out for a while. Like it's connected
Mm.
because it makes me worry too much when you're out. And if you always are running a little bit late, I get that. I run late a lot too, but I really need to get to bed by 11 so that I am well rested for work tomorrow morning. So let's just move your curfew to 10:30. That way, if you're running a bit late, I'm still in bed on time. That's the rule. I know it's frustrating, but that's what we're going with. So it's connected.
So one thing I keep hearing is that I wish we go back to the days where we're able to beat the kids, like not beat them, but like spank them. And I mean, like,
Don't do that.
no,
Don't do
no,
that.
no. But I'm just thinking, is that like, I mean, I, I did something wrong. I got smacked, but
Mhm.
was it really? Is it beneficial? I mean, like, I mean, there's got to be some type of like that doesn't help correct the
Let me
behavior.
tell you something. 100%, like they've surveyed them, 100% of felons in prison were spanked.
Mm,
So if it was that corrective, you'd have different numbers. It isn't effective because here's the thing, we can't learn when we're in a state of fear. So our prefrontal cortex, that's where we encode new information, that's where we learn. that shuts off when we're scared. If somebody's going to hit you, somebody more powerful and strong and bigger than you shift into a state of fear. That's amygdala, that's fight, flight, or freeze. The only part of your brain with blood flow basically is going to be that amygdala, and you're not going to learn anything. You'll remember being spanked, but you won't remember why. So what you learn is that your parent is dangerous. That's all you learn. So if you want your kids to learn a thing, it has to be a lot calmer. Yeah. It really can induce a lot of trauma.
Yeah, well, yeah, that could be. I mean, I paddled my kids when they were really, really young. I mean, I don't mean like smack them, just give them a pat for doing something that they shouldn't. And then afterwards, it wasn't effective anymore because that wasn't the thing. So timeout was another strategy that didn't really work. Then you had these long conversations with them, and then it just got frustrated because of everything else going on. You kind of just lose. I guess I don't mean to be a mean parent here, but you kind of lose interest in disciplining them because you're always at a lose situation. So
the goal is to build trust with your kid. So if they trust you, then you can have those conversations, and they will want to learn from you and be more receptive to your intervention. Spanking feels effective because it's aversive, and so we're going to avoid the thing, but it doesn't teach them the why, so it doesn't internalize it, right? So if it's, don't do that or I will spank you, like say don't hit your sister or I'll spank you, then they learn not to get caught and they become more likely to lie about it. But they don't learn, well, why should I not hit my sister? What should I do instead? What should I do when my sister calls me a name and I'm mad at her? All I know is don't hit her in front of dad or mom, but it doesn't teach them about how to improve relationships with their sibling. So it's effective at changing the behavior when you're there. That's it.
So in other words, don't spank.
That's my position. And you're not going to find another psychologist with everyone, I don't think. But
no, I
we're going to go into this territory. So
no, I probably did it when they were very young, but it wasn't. It was just a little pat in the back, where it was just basically at the bottom, of course, when they were wearing diapers, just to kind of get them, in a certain direction, because they're nonverbal at times, so it was really hard to communicate. But obviously you hold them and you hug them and try to keep them going, make them feel comfortable and that they're things. But later on, it didn't work. That was a lost cause because they had their own minds, they had their own things. And then we used timeout, which was not really working at all. Taking away their stuff was probably the more painful thing that you could ever do, because it was like, oh my God, you're taking away my phone, you're doing this, you're doing that. And then all of a sudden they cared. And that was the difference. And then you would have a conversation but the middle child didn't matter what you didn't matter what you took. He just didn't care. It's like, okay, I'll do something else, and then get himself in trouble. And then it's like he gets himself more and more trouble. And I think it was more of an attention seeker. And
what's the need, right? Yeah. What's the need?
And then he would gaslight as much as he could. And then, he was never really, really in trouble in the sense of nothing really major. I don't see his side with his mother, but there wasn't really much consequences with me in the sense of nothing really painfully that was harmful that he took away, other than taking away his phone, and that was it. But he didn't lose anything because I had them for a week and then they were gone for the next week. So it was really hard to hold them down to something. And I guess that's part of the problem too, is when parents don't agree, these type of behaviors basically are allowed to exist.
Yeah, it's very difficult to parent from a place where you're not inside.
Yeah.
A kid can play one with the other.
Well, I want to say thank you, Bridge and Amy, for giving me your questions. Again, next week is Grace Grossman, and her profile will come out on Friday, and you get to see who she is. One of the cool things about her, she was from, I think she's German, and then she moved to Costa Rica to teach, and it's been pretty cool. In the meantime, Deborah has volunteered her book to put in the book club, so we're going to start working on that. And if you have, there is going to be also another series, another episode or Substack, how you want to call it, of the hospital stay. So if you're following that, that's coming out this Wednesday. In the meantime, everybody, thank you for your time, wherever you're watching this. And Deborah.
Can I throw out one thing before I say
Sure.
goodbye? Since like our audience here seems, based on the questions, really interested in parenting teens, and so I just also wanted to throw out that my award-winning book about trauma recovery workbook for teens. If anybody's looking for that, you can find it anywhere books are sold. You can find my website. This is what it looks like, and it's got a copy around, right? And if you're looking for weekly essays related to trauma and mental health and just our world today, like I'd love it if you came over and found me on Mental Health Reasons.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And they can find you on your Substack, right? And it's Deborah. What's your Substack handle again?
It's D Vinall, D for Deborah, Vinall, the last name. You can look it up by the title, which is Mental Health Reasons.
And I will also put all her books in the Substack when we post this video, so you'll have that as well. So if you're looking for her, you can get there. In the meantime, everybody, thank you for joining wherever you're at. I know we have followers in Europe, Asia, and across North America, so thank you for coming, and thank you for being here. Thank you for coming a second time.
Of course, my pleasure.
I'm sure we'll bring you on again at some point. And we'll talk about another subject, hopefully, and or we stay on the same subject if people have more questions. Thank you again, and I thank you everybody for watching.